During the darkest times in Middle-earth's story, when those lands lay under the shadow of Morgoth, Orome the Valar would ride out upon his steed into Middle-earth, to hunt down and rid those lands of the evil monsters and servants of Morgoth. It is believed that the ancestors of the Mearas, the great horses of Rohan, were brought to Middle-earth by Orome, and there's also a chance that Orome's steed, called Nahar, was actually their sire. In today's episode, we'll be exploring the history and characteristics of the Mearas, along with the story of Shadowfax. So before the kingdom of Rohan was established, the Eotheod used to live in the vales of the Anduin, and back then many wild horses roamed those lands. There would come a time when one of those horses, a majestic white fowl, caught the attention of Leod, the king of the Eotheod, and he managed to capture and nurture it until it grew to be a strong and fair horse. Yet it was too proud to allow any man to tame it. Even so, King Leod was determined to master it, though when he tried to mount it, the horse threw him down, and he struck his head upon a rock, slaying him in the process. The king of the Eotheod now lay dead, and his son, called Eol, vowed to avenge his father's tragic death by hunting down this horse. Eol searched for him for many days, and when he finally caught sight of the horse, it was in his bow range, and he had the chance to deliver the killing blow. Yet, in that moment, Eol chose to spare its life instead of slaying it, and he stood up and called out to the horse, "Come hither, Mansbane, and get a new name." Upon hearing these words, the horse looked up at Eol and approached him, and Eol named him Felaroth. He told the horse that despite the tragic death of his father, he didn't blame him for his death, for he understood that the horse merely wanted to be free. Yet even so, the horse still owed him a great debt for taking his father's life, and Eol demanded that Felaroth must surrender his freedom to Eol and accept him as his master for the rest of his life. Eol then tried to mount Felaroth, and to everyone's surprise, the horse submitted to its new master. Felaroth wouldn't allow anyone, apart from Eol, to ride him, and he wouldn't accept any bridle or saddle to be placed upon him, and he was even capable of understanding the speech of men. He was known as the first of the Mearas, and it's believed that his ancestors were brought out of the west by Orome, and their lifespan was over twice that of normal horses, for the Mearas lived as long as the men of Rohan. All of Felaroth's descendants would share his title of Mearas, and they would also inherit his extended lifespan, and they refused to bear anybody apart from the king of Rohan and his sons. It's also worth mentioning that these Mearas were clearly very distinct from other horses, for the men of Rohan were able to recognize them by sight alone. In the year 2510 of the Third Age, a great army of Easterlings attacked the lands of Gondor, and Eol would ride upon Felaroth to aid his Gondorian allies in the Battle of the Field of Celebran. Together, the armies of the Eotheod and Gondor managed to overwhelm their enemies and clench victory, and Gondor gave the land of Calenarthon as a gift to Eol's people, and so the kingdom of Rohan was established. For the next 35 years of his life, Felaroth would know peace as he roamed across the plains of Rohan, though he would be called once more to battle when an army of Easterlings invaded the northern reaches of Rohan. Eol would manage to lead the Rohirrim to victory as they dealt with the Easterling threat, though both Eol and Felaroth were tragically slain in this battle, and they were buried together in a mound outside of the Gate of Edoras. Out of all of Felaroth's descendants, Shadowfax was probably the most famous of the Mearas. He was tireless and swift, with a coat that glistened like silver, and many years had passed in Rohan since a horse as great as Shadowfax had been born. It was said that in him one of the mighty steeds of old had returned, and Theoden would even go as far as to say that there would never be another horse as great as him. Now, after Gandalf escaped from his imprisonment in Orthanc, he travelled swiftly to Rohan to warn the king about Saruman's treachery, and to inform him on how it was crucial for Rohan to prepare for sudden war. Yet King Theoden dismissed Gandalf's advice, and he paid no attention to him, for he was under the twisted influence of Wormtongue, and Theoden sent Gandalf away, and he told him to take any horse that he desired, as long as he left Rohan swiftly. Theoden might have chosen his words more carefully, if he could have predicted that Gandalf would have the gall to take Shadowfax out of all the horses in Edoras, the chief of the Mearas and the most precious of all of Theoden's horses, and he was furious at this act of insolence. It seems that at first Shadowfax refused to allow Gandalf to mount him, for he would run off whenever Gandalf drew near, and it took Gandalf 3 days before he managed to tame Shadowfax. It's also interesting to note that even though Shadowfax used to belong to King Theoden, we are told that Gandalf was the first person to ever ride him, and it seems that, just like his ancestor, Shadowfax was able to understand the speech of men, and he needed no urging or guidance to reach his destination. There was also no saddle that was rich or fair enough for Shadowfax, and so Gandalf would ride him in elven fashion, without a harness, and it was Shadowfax's responsibility to make sure that his rider remained on his back. Now, just to give you an idea of the incredible speed of Shadowfax, we'll be comparing Gandalf's travels on a map with those of the Nazgul. So when the Nazgul first entered the Shire, Gandalf had just tamed Shadowfax, and together they rode away from Rohan. Over the next 9 days, Gandalf reached the Shire and travelled to Bree, and he would battle the Nazgul upon Weathertop. Now, to be fair, during this time the Nazgul were searching for the hobbits, and so we doubt that they were travelling at their top speed. However, we can still appreciate the incredible speed of Shadowfax, and we know for a fact that the horses of the Nazgul had no chance at keeping up with him. Gandalf and Shadowfax would eventually part ways when they reached the Trollfells, for this land was too uneven to travel on horseback, and he sent Shadowfax back to Rohan. By now, a great friendship and love had grown between them, and Gandalf would only have to call out to him to bring him back to his side. And it seems that they could also communicate with thought alone, for later in the books we see how Gandalf was able to summon Shadowfax by bending his thoughts towards him. After Gandalf returned as Gandalf the White, he was reunited with Shadowfax outside of Fangorn Forest, and they rode together in haste to Edoras to free Theoden from the clutches of Saruman. The King of Rohan was finally able to think freely, without being blinded by Wormtongue's lies, and Theoden was incredibly grateful for Gandalf's help. He wanted to repay him in some way, and he offered Gandalf any gift from among his possessions, apart from his sword, and Gandalf chose the great horse Shadowfax. This gift would end up saving Rohan, for while Theoden travelled towards Helm's Deep, Gandalf made use of Shadowfax's speed to search for the scattered survivors of the second Battle of the Fords of Isen. He would rally them and gather them together, and he sent some of them to bury their fallen comrades and to defend Edoras from plunderers, while the rest were sent to join Erkenbrand, and together with Gandalf they managed to break the siege of Helm's Deep. Shadowfax would later carry Pippin and Gandalf all the way to Minas Tirith in only 5 days, with very little rest. And in the battles that followed, he would have to face and endure the terror of the Nazgul on 2 occasions. On the first occasion, Gandalf rode out into the Pelennor fields to drive off the Nazgul that were attacking Faramir's retreat, while the second episode was after the Witch King burst through the great gate of Minas Tirith, emanating a terrible aura of fear and despair. And no horse apart from Shadowfax could have endured it. He stood unwavering and steadfast as he faced the Witch King, a graven and imposing figure. After Sauron's defeat and the end of the War of the Ring, Gandalf and Shadowfax would travel together to the Old Forest to speak to Tom Bombadil, and Shadowfax would eventually join Gandalf when he finally sailed across the sea and into the West. It wasn't really unfitting for him to return to the West, considering his heritage. And since Gandalf was one of the angelic Maiar beings, he could take whatever he loved with him when he finally returned to Valinor. We imagine that Shadowfax wasn't the last of the Mearas, for it would seem odd if there were no other descendants of Felaroth. And so it's very likely that in the years to come, the kings and princes of Rohan would still ride upon these incredible steeds. So, this wraps up today's episode, and we hope you enjoyed it. Do you think that the Mearas still persisted throughout the Fourth Age? And did you like the ending of Shadowfax's story, how he joins Gandalf in his final journey across the Great Sea? As always, we'd like to give a quick shout out to all of the patrons who choose to support this channel. Your help makes this channel possible, and your support is deeply appreciated. Particularly the Valar tier patrons, Jacob Williams, Michael Angel, and T. Gorman, and the Wizard tier patrons, James Stodgel, Andrew Burma, Mike Feeney, and Roland Meervold. If you'd also like to help and support this channel while unlocking some cool perks, we'll be leaving a link to the Patreon page in the video description. You could also support this channel by checking out our store and by following us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and joining our Discord server. All of these links can be found in the video description. Don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe to join our fellowship today. Until next time, when we'll once again explore the magical world and lore of Middle-earth.